Hey Newegg viewers, Juan Carlos Bagnell here in Newegg Studios. You spend so much time building up your rig, you put in all of those fancy components, that really awesome graphics card, and the last step of the chain is getting an image up on a display that you're gonna be proud to show off. And this video, we're gonna be talking to Jorge from MSI. You're gonna walk us through the new gaming monitors coming out of MSI. Jorge, thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So just real quick for our audience, can you briefly describe your role at MSI?
Sure. So at MSI, I work in the marketing department for technical marketing. So I deal with checking out specs for all of our different products, monitors obviously included, motherboards, graphics cards, you name it. I deal with all of that.
And you're getting a lot of the feedback from consumers too.
That's definitely true. Yeah, we work with our consumers and just people online, forums, Reddit, whatever you have out there, and take their feedback, pass it on to our HQ, our engineers, and continue to improve our products that way as well.
Excellent. So I just want to jump right in. Sure. This is a really pretty slab of material right here. Just briefly describe, we're talking about two different monitors in the 27-inch space from MSI.
That's correct. They're actually both in the same series. So we have our Optix MAG27 CR and the 272 CRX models. So these are our newest revisions that are actually out available now. We're pushing the boundaries that we're used to with better specs and definitely more features as well.
MSI's been making monitors for a while. Again,
right.
You're one of those brands that I don't think people always realize how many components, how many parts of the chain you guys are responsible for. What separates these monitors from the other display options that MSI currently has?
Right. Well, relatively speaking, in a sense, we're still new to the market, but for gaming monitors, compared to others that are out there, like you said, we've had our hat in the ring for a while now. So, starting off, we've been evolving and starting off with, say, 120 hertz refresh rate monitors and maybe 3 millisecond response time. Now we're up to, with these monitors, 165 hertz and further beyond.
Just from coming up the early days of CRT gaming and stuff like that, it's so funny to hear someone say baseline 165.
That's where we are now. It's pretty great. I'm used to 60 hertz monitors, what I grew up with, and I tell you, the first time you use a higher refresh rate monitor, honestly, you could just spend a ton of time just moving your mouse cursor around.
Yeah, it's so hard to go back.
Exactly.
I mean, it's one of those things we go through those resolution wars, and it never really seems like the most amazing upgrade when you just flip the switch.
Right.
But then you get a little used to it, and it's so hard to go back. Looking at a 4K display, oh yeah, that looks a little better, and my movies look a little better, and I shoot a bunch of 4K footage, and now it's native resolution. I notice it more now going back to 1080p.
You go back, it's not the same. It feels really sluggish if you go back to 60 or something. But it's not only that, we're trying to pack more features into the monitor as well. One of the big things that not a lot of people have is software-based menu control. So that's pretty big in my eyes. We have your standard, controls on the monitor itself. So on the rear of the monitor, we have the Navi key. It's like a joystick, which you can use to control certain settings, change the contrast, brightness. Especially with these type of monitors, once you start hitting higher sizes as well, it's harder to reach back there sometimes.
Totally.
It's not very convenient for every setup. So now you can actually install our gaming Osd App. So you could bring up that on-screen display through software, use your mouse and keyboard to configure everything, and it gives you other options as well. So you're able to create specific profiles for a game. So if you like certain contrast for this game, you can set it for that and just quickly switch between that. Other settings as well. Picture-in-picture, we can have multiple full-screen images at once. One of my favorite features, a newer type, a more advanced type of dealing with overly saturated black areas, essentially night vision. It's an algorithm that helps determine it pretty intelligently compared to previous iterations. What spots on the screen, on the display, are really dark, really black, and it helps you brighten that up. It's able to detect what areas need to be fixed, and it's able to just apply that to those specific areas. It's giving you overall a much better picture.
I want to backtrack just a little bit. We're at kind of an evolution point. Curved monitors came out a couple years ago. It was kind of a novelty. It does seem to be that this is an immersive experience. You're seeing a lot more of these on gamers' desks than in years past. Describe what the decision was, and especially getting some market feedback from MSI consumers on focusing for this type of an experience as opposed to some of competitors who might be looking at more flat, and then we're just gonna try and ramp up the fastest possible frame rate that we can.
Yeah, and myself as a consumer, when, like you said, these started popping up, I think they look really cool, right? It's, physically they're pretty awesome looking. However, is it just a gimmick? Is it, does it actually have any practicality to it? And they certainly do, with gaming, these type of gaming monitors curved. The buzzword around is immersion, right?
Yeah.
That it's more immersive, and it definitely is. And the reason for that really is compared to, say, a flat monitor, the way those flat monitors emit light, it's kind of perpendicular to the panel, right? So it's just straight away, so you end up with areas that aren't really hitting you directly.
Right.
So what that ends up doing is affecting your peripheral vision a bit. So any light that's not really direct to you, it gets a little bit blurry in your vision and maybe creates some perceived image distortion. Having a curved screen, it kind of helps resolve that a bit. So now you're kind of at a focal point, like a radial distance away from the screen, right?
I would imagine that the gaming audience would be pretty hip to this kind of stuff.
Right.
But was there any sort of education involved? We have all of those TV buying guides.
Sure.
You're buying this diagonal with this resolution. You want to set your TV this distance away from your couch. Yeah. Was there some kind of internal discussion? Like, were you worried gamers might try and put this a little too far away, or maybe they're just sitting with their nose in the screen and not getting the optimal viewing experience?
Yeah, there is an optimal distance. So with the monitor, you have curvature ratings, right? For the standard monitor or curved monitor, up until now, it's been around 1800R. And that kind of tells you the maximum optimal distance you can be from the monitor to get a great experience. So usually it's like 5 meters, so like 1.8 meters or something like that. So it's pretty long distance. But overall, with these new monitors, we're trying to get an even tighter curvature to it, further adding to that immersive experience. So with these, we're hitting 1500R, which I know it's kind of counterintuitive that the smaller number is totally more aggressive in curvature, but that's what we're trying to do. And yeah, overall there is kind of like a teaching or learning experience to go with it, but I think until you really experience it, use it yourself, you don't really, it's hard to really get, right? Yeah. So I really, whenever we go to shows or something like that, I'm really glad when people come up to the monitors and give it a shot, play a few games. They always seem to leave impressed and looking forward to using it more.
No, so. and it's something that kind of grows on you. Like we were saying before, I mean, with higher refresh rates, it's one of those things that, oh, neat, when you first experience it, and then it gets hard to go back if you get used to it.
Exactly. These type of monitors are definitely great for AAA titles, something like, say, Borderlands 3, Outer Worlds, something that has a whole world there, really gets you immersed. It's really great to experience. I'm glad we have them, and I'm glad we're continuing with the curvature. But it's, the great thing about it, and something I kind of saw recently, and that I didn't really think about before, is that having a curved screen helps in other ways as well. So it actually helps with reducing eye strain, which is something I never really thought was the case, but it turns out that since the human eye is a bit curved as well, compared to, say, a flat monitor, whenever you look at a flat monitor, the distance changes. From your focal distance, it changes depending on what area of the monitor you're looking.
So your eye is constantly making little micro focusing adjustments. Okay, that makes sense.
Now that you have a curved monitor, it doesn't have to do that as much since you're at a radial distance away. So pretty much every area of the monitor is equidistant to your eye. Then you couple that with blue filter, light filter technology, and anti-flicker technology, and it goes a long way. And who doesn't want to have more fresh eyes when you're gaming, be more alert?
Again, now it's a stamina argument.
Exactly, it really is. But it helps. If you're tired, you're not going to perform as well. So it helps a bit. And so as someone with glasses, I can definitely tell. And
excellent. Well, and this also seems to be like the right time to be sort of pushing this technology, investing in this technology. You're partnered with Samsung for the actual panels.
That's right, yeah. These are Samsung panels.
So, I mean, when these types of products first started emerging, it seemed to me like the manufacturing was kind of brute force.
Yes.
Like you just take a regular panel and just kind of bend it.
Yeah.
But now it seems like the sort of manufacturing side of this is taking this much more seriously as its own segment of product, which is why we're able to get some of these more aggressive curves.
That's correct, right. So yeah, before you run into issues when you're just brute forcing bending a monitor, light bleed and...
I mean, just saying it sounds bad.
Yeah, exactly. So now that you have a more customized manufacturing process for these, you're able to push higher curves, obviously more immersion with that, with these 1500R. And the panel technology also increases. You're able to increase refresh rate, keep the response times low, and overall you get a better product.
Well, and also it seems like you're able to hang with all of those other monitor metrics that we care about, things like the contrast ratio and the HDR modes.
We went with VA type panels as opposed to something like IPS, just for that reason, since VA panels tend to have better contrast ratios as well. So I think with these we're hitting something like 3000 to 1 contrast ratio, and especially these panels are also HDR ready, so you even get better contrast fidelity as well. So
now, one of the things I thought was kind of interesting, so we've got 2 different flavors of this monitor, and that the refresh rate was the differentiator, both of them coming in at the same size. What was MSI's strategy on keeping the 27-inch monitor consistent between those 2 offerings?
You know, it's the same size, and the reason really the only changes is the refresh rate is to give multiple people the option of moving up to these higher refresh rates, because you do require to have some type of pretty good hardware in order to run, especially at higher refresh rates like 240 Hertz. So not everybody has 2070 RTX 2060 or something in their system. You still have something like a GTX 1070, some older hardware. You could still play, esport games, Call of Duty even, with 165 Hertz. You don't necessarily have to break the bank with your build in order to move up to the super high 240 Hertz screens. But obviously, if you have a system that can do it, then you have the means and you have that available to you.
So the design, very clean, very sleek. One of the things we've got to discuss, though, because we live in a world of RGBs.
Right.
Talk us through putting RGBs on this monitor, and what was it about the gaming audience that you thought they would appreciate that as a design influence?
Everybody knows the more RGB you have, the better gamer you are.
I mean, it's like putting speed holes in my car. It's like it's at least 15 frames per second faster now.
Of course. What we wanted to do with these monitors is make sure they fit into that your gaming environment, your gamer space. So a lot of components nowadays feature RGB, and we wanted to make the monitor inclusive to that as well. Especially if you have other MSI brand products, you can sync them up with our Mystic Light software. So our headsets, mice, keyboards, graphics cards, what have you, they can all sync up, and you have a really nice experience in your room. And aside from that, there's other features on the monitor as well that gamers would definitely appreciate. So we feature a USB hub there for 2 ports with, I believe, 3.2 Gen 1 USB. Pass-throughs, exactly. So that would free up at least 1 port on your computer, which is pretty great, when you have a lot of devices, webcams, and what have you. Well, another feature that's on it that I really enjoy is a headset hanger. You can actually press a button here, it ejects a headset hanger. Hey, if you need a break, snack break or bathroom break, take it off, put it on.
I mean, it's silly, but I have so much stuff on my desk, and I don't want to put a headphone stand, like where all of the chaos is happening kind of around my setup.
Just don't leave it on your keyboard or something like that. So
I did have a question about Mystic Light, because this is, again, all of these products seem like they're also built with some evolution in mind. I mean, never before have we cared about firmware updates on monitors, but now these things can actually help improve the functionality, and again, we're looking at trying to create immersive experiences. Is Mystic Light working with game developers to try and help with RGB as a practical notification or a game addition? Your health is low and then stuff starts glowing red, or maybe you set it for your PC where if your chip is starting to run hot, you'll get a visual cue coming off of your keyboard. Was Mystic Light included, was RGB included with that kind of notion for where Mystic Light could go?
Sure, definitely. That's actually one of the features of Mystic Light. We call it ambient link. So not only does it work in that aspect, with certain games at the moment we have, say, functionality with games like Assassin's Creed, for example, like you said. Some of our other monitors tend to have further RGB up here on the front. And with those, stuff like that, like you mentioned, is possible, where you could have your health bar there, you take a hit, it could flash red, or some type of indicator like that can help you in game. And not only that, but other third-party devices that are RGB capable, say the Philips Hue or Nanoleafs, can also react.
So there's
to
more
the environment.
interoperability between these different products and stuff. Like,
exactly.
Not like there's one cohesive standard, but at least we're acknowledging that these things should be able to talk to each other.
Exactly. It's all about making everything inclusive in your environment.
So just to kind of focus in on the two different models, the 240 hertz version of this, MSI is looking at their customer base. Who do they see that monitor really going to?
Definitely a good question. So the 240 hertz model will definitely require you to have a pretty good system, right? It is more hardware intensive to have a 240 hertz monitor, and however, we're kind of trying to make it so more people have access to that as well. So we're keeping the panel at a 1920 by 1080 resolution for these particular models. That way it's an entry point for everybody. If you do want to, you just built your system, you have a really high-end Intel CPU or AMD CPU in there, really good graphics card, or even a mid-range, higher tier graphics card, you can still jump over to the 240 hertz refresh rate and have a great experience. You don't always need to be hitting the 240 hertz refresh rate also, because they feature adaptive sync technology.
Right, they're FreeSync compatible.
They're Radeon FreeSync compatible, exactly. So even if you're not hitting, say, 200 FPS even, the monitor is able to compensate for that and still give you a really smooth experience. So,
well, I mean, was there some sort of internal discussion at MSI, because there are these very specific camps of competitive gaming, like, we don't really feel like 240 hertz is necessarily a game-changing advantage for like a MOBA. Right. But hey, man, if you're sitting there playing shooters, that twitch rate is extremely high. Or maybe even something too where you've got so many actions per second, like an RTS.
Right.
Like were those kinds of considerations weighed against the feedback that you were getting from your consumers?
Yeah, definitely. It's going to benefit some types of games and gamers more than others, right? More esports-centric games would see a higher value from it. However, it's still not lost, I feel, in other types of games, even single-player games, like I mentioned before, like Red Dead
the fluidity
or something.
is a really nice perk.
Exactly.
But again, when you're talking about the difference between someone who's casually playing at a 144 hertz or a 120 hertz versus someone who's looking to eke out the maximum financial advantage of investing in this kind of gear.
That's right, yeah. So, if you're hardcore about getting every advantage that you can, then it's definitely what you want to be looking at is the 240 hertz models.
And MSI has a lot of relationships with esports, like actual competitors. I mean, you guys are very active in this space. Yeah. Was this also some of the conversation on the sort of the standards that esports competitors are looking at when they're hitting these arenas? If
your opponents have a 240 hertz monitor and you don't, then that's a disadvantage. And we do sponsor a good amount of esports professional teams. Be it in the past through
I've seen Lucky on a lot of
Method, anything like that. So professional gamers, they want top of the notch technology to get the best advantages, as much as possible. So that's why we have we get their feedback, and we have these type of monitors available for them and anybody else trying to get to that level as well.
Excellent. Well, George, thanks so much for dropping by. I mean, these are some really fun conversations, so I'm glad that you're able to follow up on what MSI is doing here.
Sure, yeah, my pleasure. Thanks again for having me.
Excellent. All right, folks, that's the scoop. MSI, 2 models, 27-inch monitors, super, super fast. Get that refresh rate up higher, compete better, compete faster. If you'd like more information on what MSI is offering for their monitor lineups, you can hit the links down in the description below. For Newegg Studios, I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.